Stable.
Hello.
So I
Oh, there we
here.
go.
I am so sorry. I was trying to join from my computer. I've never done a Twitter space before, and it was not giving me an option to try to be a speaker. That was so frustrating. I can't tell you how many different things I tried to do. But yes, I could hear you. And yes, I do have an original blue check mark. I haven't paid for Twitter Blue yet. I still need to get around to doing that. Maybe, I don't know. I've given it, I'll be honest with you, about zero thought.
Cool. So thank you so much for joining us. By the way, are you watching the semifinals after? Do you have a team that you're cheering for?
I know this will be disappointing to many, but no. I don't watch any sporting events whatsoever. Unfortunately, I'm pretty boring in that regard. So, yeah, I usually just get the reports from my parents who call me and wish I cared.
I got it. All right, cool. So thanks so much for joining us. And as I mentioned earlier, you're a VC, but you also have a pretty impressive background as an operator. So if you can share a bit more about that before we dive into the questions, that would be great.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, as you mentioned, I am a VC now. I'll tell folks just a little bit about the firm to give them some context. I work with Redpoint. We've been around for 20 years. We invest really all the way from the seed through to later growth rounds across two teams. I'm on the early team. And we're really focused primarily on seed, Series A, and we do some Bs as well. And I think what we're most well known for is really enterprise software investing and infrastructure and developer tools. Um, Before joining Redpoint, I was the chief operating officer at GitHub for 2.5 years following the Microsoft acquisition of the company, and worked across the business really to help mature and scale our community and our commercial business. And then prior to that, I was the founder of two companies in kind of the developer and DevOps space. I like to say we did DevOps before it was a thing. My last company, Bitnami, did software packaging and deployment and was acquired by VMware before I joined GitHub. So I've spent, really my whole career, almost 20 years in open source infrastructure and developer tools. And as you might expect, that's what I focus on here at Redpoint as well. So really anything that's developer first. I also look at a lot of just broader enterprise software companies.
Awesome. And that's really cool. And congrats on you could say inventing DevOps before it was a thing.
I'm definitely not
So
claiming I invented it. I want to be clear on that.
No, that's fine. I've met someone in the past who claimed to have invented the App Store before Apple. So that's inventing DevOps is a smaller claim. But no, just kidding. You've obviously had experience on both sides of the table, which is really cool. And the main topic we'll be covering today is exactly that, the engineering team in light of fundraising, or and this, from both sides, like what do investors care about within engineering teams? What do engineering teams should care about as the company is raising funds? So let's start with just what VCs look for on the technical side of things, whether it's the tech itself or the organization that's producing the tech. What are the top things that you're looking for, the top warning signs that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think it's important to talk about like the context or the stage of the company too, because VCs are looking at very different things at different stages, right? I met with a company yesterday and it was essentially two people who were really experienced in a particular area and it had built kind of the core tech that supports the industry today, but it was just them and an idea and a deck, right? And so at that point, you're looking for things like what's the founder's vision for the business? And are they uniquely suited to be successful in building a massive company in this space? And then, is the market big enough to support a very significant independent company, right? We're always looking for companies where there's a really credible path to going all the way through to IPO. I mean, that's the bar that we set for every investment that we make. Do we believe this can IPO or not? And so, we're always looking at market size as one of the top things. I think, as you progress through the stages of funding, people start looking for different things, right? At a more typical seed deal, people usually have a product built out. They typically have a few, maybe design partners. They're probably not monetizing, but they could be. Um, and then you're really starting to look for, how is the product being received by these early design partners, and are they willing to take a dependency on it, right? Like, if you took the product away from them, would they throw fit because they love it so much? So we're just kind of looking for that level of need. And then, of course, as you move to the Series A, it's more about um, has this product and business kind of found product market fit? How has the founding team gone about expanding the team and investing in bringing great talent on? Have they been able to attract great talent? And then we're looking to see those early signs of product market fit, right? And then, as companies progress more, you start looking at like revenue metrics and cost of acquisition, cost of customer acquisition, and things like that. Um, and so if you kind of work within that context, then in terms of what we're looking for on the product side and the part that, engineers might be most directly involved in, one thing is absolutely like, what is the product experience? We spend a lot of our time talking to either, current customers, if you've had them and made those intros, or people who are in your target market, right? Or who might have tried or evaluated the product at some point. And we want to hear that they've had a great experience. We want to hear they love the product. We want to hear that, if they purchased, they had a great sales experience. If they've, needed support, that they had a great support experience. And then you're also, for anything that's like, a web service, you're looking also for reliability, right? Like, are they having a lot of outages? Have they, has there been a lot of downtime, things like that? Um, it's not so much about like, hey, what choices did you make in your tech stack, right? Like, we don't have necessarily opinions most of the time on, what language you're writing your code in, unless it's highly relevant to the business for some reason. And, I can talk about that too if folks are interested.
So you're saying outages. Basically, what you're saying is the engineering team needs to not interfere. No, just kidding though. But you just started saying about the tech stack, and that actually brings another interesting question, which is how important is it for the tech to be novel in some way? Is it just another factor, or maybe it even changes from company to company and domain to domain?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're building, right? And like how much the tech stack might influence that. So we invest in the company. We haven't announced it yet, so I can't give too many details, but they've written their entire code base in Rust. And that was really important for this particular product because it had to be just absolutely blazingly fast. And there were some things that could be achieved with Rust that couldn't have been achieved with a different language, right? Um, there is another company. Actually, I can talk about this one, Dagger. It's from the founders of Docker, Solomon Hykes and Sam and Andrea. Just an amazing founding team. And they're really trying to bring programmability to your CI/CD pipelines and give you a way to actually write your CI/CD in code instead of just a bunch of scripts and things like that. And when they initially started, they chose to build a lot of the product in Q because Q allowed them to do a lot of really pretty novel and unique and powerful things that were a really good fit for what they were building. Now, one of the challenges with Q and their approach was that folks really needed to learn Q to use the product. And that just created a lot of friction because Q is not, a wildly popular language at this point. And anytime if you have to ask somebody to learn a new language just to use your tool, that can be a big hurdle to overcome. So, they recently made the strategic decision to move to a multi-lang approach, and they still use Q under the hood, but now there are SDKs for Go and Node and Python and stuff. So that change materially impacted their business. So I think we only care about the tech stack that you're using if it materially impacts the product. And one thing I guess to note on that is, sometimes there's new technology. Like I'm really interested in WebAssembly because I think it enables you to do a lot of things that you couldn't do before because of the way it's kind of like sandbox, right? And it's like a deny by default approach. You can just do a lot of cool things with it that you couldn't do before. And that's interesting to me because whenever I'm evaluating, a company in the developer space, I'm always looking for like, is it a 10x improvement over what exists today, right? When you go back to my earlier comment about building a large independent company, you need to build something that's differentiated enough that you can actually build a massive business around it and typically like win an entire market and become the leader. And you don't typically do that with just incremental changes over existing products, right? You usually do that when you have a step change in the value that you can deliver. And in some cases, it might be a new technology like eBPF or like WASM that can actually allow you to do something or build a product that's 10 times better than what's in the market. So that's when I care about the tech stack you've chosen. Otherwise, I'm not going to come in and ask you what database you built your product around unless it somehow is super relevant for the product and gives you a strategic advantage.
Yeah, you're not going to come in and say that we picked the wrong version of MongoDB. Uh,
No, absolutely not.
uh, it's actually funny because I think some founders actually have a notion that VCs might come in and ask those questions. But,
No, yeah,
but
no, I never have. And yeah, most of the time we really don't care, honestly. We care if you're good. And like if you're building a developer company, we really trust that you know how to build what you say you're going to build. And we check your references to make sure that's true. But other than that, yeah, we leave those decisions up to you.
that's actually a really important point. So references is your main way of understanding if the um, tech talent on the founding team is the right material.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, look, a lot of deals come through our network, right? I mean, one of the benefits of having been a founder and operator is I got the opportunity to work with a lot of stellar people. And so sometimes I'm looking at, you know, people I've worked with and I know how good they are because I've seen it firsthand. But a lot of the rest of the time, you're doing a lot of back channel referencing is the truth, right? I mean, people provide references sometime, but most of the time we're going, asking other people we know who know them or have worked with them before, about their experience in doing so. It is rather shocking, actually, being on this side of the table. You always know people are pretty well connected, but I would say we're mostly like one or two clicks away from literally anyone we want to background check. It's pretty wild how interconnected the tech community is, even globally, right? Even if we're talking about companies in Israel or Europe, and we've funded companies in both places, it's still pretty easy, and I think it's
Well, there,
important to
there
be
you
aware
have
of.
it, folks. Make sure you have good relationships with everyone you meet because they might show up on a on a back channel reference for you.
Yeah, don't be an asshole. It'll catch up with you later.
Cool. So, what are some of if you're looking at the tech team,
Yeah.
what are some of the red flags that you've seen in the past, whether it's the CTO or anyone else on the team? What are the things that you look at and you say, even though I don't care about the tech as much, this is something I do care about?
Yeah, I mean, beyond references, I think there's a few things. Like one thing we really like to see is people who have domain expertise, right? So they would either be like they built a product in a similar space before, or maybe they've even been a buyer or a consumer of the type of product that you're building. I think, and I'm talking about early stage companies, it changes a lot as a company scales, right? You're looking for different things. But if I'm primarily talking about seed and kind of Series A companies, I want to make sure that the people building the product really have a lot of depth in that particular space. Because I think even if you have a founder or, a CTO or a product leader that's setting a lot of the product direction, the better like the senior tech team really feels some empathy for what they're building. I just think you end up with a better product as a result. So we really look for that, like, we talk about founder market fit, right? This is kind of like, engineering leader or early engineer market fit. Like, are these folks really well suited to build in this space? I think that's one thing. When we're talking about leadership too, um, obviously we love to see people who have startup experience before, but a lot of first time founders don't necessarily have that. And that's fine. I've backed plenty of those people. What we definitely end up digging into when it's the case is if somebody is an engineering leader or a founder coming in out of a very big company, right? If you've been at Google or Microsoft or Amazon for 10 years, we always have a little trepidation just because it's like, how are these folks going to be able to deliver in an early stage startup where they just don't have the kind of structure and support resources that you have in a big company? It's just such a different environment. And so, there are people that have made that transition, right? I think about one of the founders of Diagrid. It's not one of our portfolio companies, but I really love the team there. And, one of the founders, I think it had been Microsoft for 25 years, started working on this open source project called Dapper. They spun it out of Microsoft and they seem to be doing a great job with the company. But a lot of people really struggle in making that transition and don't know what they're getting into. And so that would be something that we definitely be talking to them about. And also when we were doing any reference checking, try to get a sense from those references of how well this person is going to be able to actually deliver in a startup environment. And if it's a leader, it's also about like how great of a team can they attract, right? One of your most important jobs as a leader is to hire an exceptional talent. And if we can see that somebody is a magnet for talent, right? Just amazing people are following them, either from job to job or, into a startup that they're creating. I think that that goes a really long way too.
Totally, and I really like your point about people coming in from a large corporate environment and needing different skills to succeed there, right? Um, and in a way, if you're working for Google or Microsoft or anything like that, then you're used to having teams do things for you, right? You have a large talent acquisition team,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a large DevOps team, and in a way, you become very specialized in just one skill out of many. Whereas if you're in an early stage startup, you're expected to do a bit of everything and be this jack of all trades.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. And you don't have separate teams usually in an early startup. You don't always even have like separate,
You don't even
infrastructure
have teams.
teams. And yeah, it's just one group of people that's like, working their tushies off to build a great product. And, again, if it's, SaaS or an online service, to make sure it's up and running, and you end up getting pulled into all different aspects of the company. And, that is a really fun place to be. If you ask me, I love that stage, but it's not for everybody.
Totally. And I also think this is the first time the word tushies has appeared on our Twitter space series. So thank you, Erica. Uh,
Well, I swore once, so I figured I had to like balance it out with something a little softer.
so, um, since you mentioned that a lot of your focus is on companies that sell to developers, how important is it for the CEO to be technical, if at all?
Mm. Yeah, well, I am highly biased because I was the CEO of a developer company and I'm not an engineer. And I don't consider myself technical, though I've certainly been fortunate to absorb a lot through osmosis over many years. Um, I don't think the CEO necessarily has to be technical. I do think they have to really understand the space. So hopefully they were a buyer of the technology or worked closely with whatever it is that you're building or in the space, right? I think that's really important. And that's kind of one of the things we talk about when we talk about founder market fit. Um, when the CEO is not technical, I like to see a really technical, partner in the founding team. I think it would be very hard to back a non-technical CEO of a developer first company that did not have a technical co-founder. Um, perhaps if they had already hired somebody that wasn't a co-founder but was very good, we might be able to get over that. But it's really hard if you're not technical to identify outstanding technical talent, right? We used to call it the BS test at Bitnami. And I would always say that Daniel, my co-founder, was our BS detector, right? Because people, especially back then when I was newer in the industry, could say a lot of things to me that I would buy, that would be red flags to somebody who really knew the technology. And so you need to have somebody that can help you build out that amazing technical team. And to my earlier point, attract really great talent. And I think that's hard if you don't have anyone on the founding team that's building of a company that's building a very technical product. If you don't have a tech founder.
And attracting talent is just so important, and it's a great point because you don't necessarily have to be the best tech person to attract tech talent, but you do need to at least be able to converse with them in a way that makes them somewhat impressed about your ability to grasp technical topics.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also, just when it comes to messaging and talking about what you're building, it's really hard to do that if you're not kind of immersed in the culture of the people who are going to be adopting or buying your product, right? If you can't identify with them. That's why it's so hard if you're building a developer first company to hire somebody to run, product marketing or any of your marketing stuff or community stuff that's not technical or has some technical background, right? Because they don't really necessarily speak the same language and know how to talk about the product. And sometimes I know some people may hate me for this, but like I'd love to see more really talented engineers move into, product marketing and kind of early growth marketing roles because when you have that kind of talent and you understand how to build like a PLG machine, I think those folks are kind of unicorns because not many people make that transition and they're just unbelievably valuable to a company. And like every company that I've invested in is looking to hire folks like that, and it's just they're very few and hard and far behind between. So if
Totally.
any of you
One
haven't
one of the
yep.
toughest hires for sure. And it actually
Hmm.
reminds me of something that Nat once said to me. So Nat Friedman was the CEO of GitHub during the time Erica was there too, and he said that he personally went over every marketing page or landing page or anything like that because he was able to look through the eyes of the buyer or the user because of his technical background, but also understand what it means to create a good landing page. Given his business side as well. So it's really hard to find those kinds of people, and I can definitely relate to that. I'm an ex-engineer as well, and one of the things that I try to do is also try to use my understanding of what it means to be an engineer or an engineering manager who buys software, and use that to kind of own the copy and the voice of everything that's being done.
Yeah, and
Um,
you're a great example, I think, of like that founder market fit, right? Like you really understand. You've seen people go through this journey, like of learning a new technology. You've been on the other side of it, right? Like you can deeply
oh, stop
empathize
it.
with
Come
what you're
on.
building.
Thank
It
you.
is true.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Let's, if you're willing to share, and by the way, no need to mention company names or anything like that, but if you're willing to share two stories, one where during due diligence or before or after an investment, one story where something by the engineering team really caught your eye, really made it interesting for you, or made you, sort of got the tipping point for you to invest in that company, and the opposite story where you had some conviction about a company, but then looking into their engineering team, you decided it's not the right company for you.
Yeah, it's a fun question. I'm going to have a very disappointing answer, which is like, I can't say that either of those things have happened in diligence. I mean, the reality is, very few companies actually get all the way to like really deep diligence, right? It's probably out of every, I don't know, if we count every company that even like approaches me, out of every 100 companies, I probably meet with, I don't know, maybe 15 of them. And for first meeting, I probably only meet with 5 of them for a second meeting. And then maybe 2 of those, I do like what we would consider real diligence, like write up a memo. And our memos are like, you know, probably like 8 core pages. And then we usually have something like 30 pages of notes beyond that, from reference calls and um, talking to potential customers and things like that. And then maybe, you know, a half to one of those actually, like, we would write a term sheet. And I've never so far, I mean, I've only been in venture for a year, but I have never had a deal fall apart after the term sheet. Like every term sheet that we've written, and that's across the entire fund, like every term sheet we have written, whether I was leading the deal or not, while I have been here, has closed. And I think in the history of Redpoint, you can probably count on one hand the number of deals that haven't closed post term sheet. So I know, like, when I was a founder, people used to talk about, deals falling apart and it's not done until it's done. And yeah, sorta. But like, if you're working with a really reputable firm, like, we don't, once we write a term sheet, we're pretty high conviction. I will say, so now that I've given you that kind of rough funnel numbers based on gut and not any real analysis, I'll be honest with you. But it's usually much earlier in the process. So it would never get to diligence, right? We would see, hey, there are outages constantly, the service isn't up. Or we would say, hey, look, we talked to 5 users of this product and they don't really love it. And they told us about all these product issues, right? Or we did a little quick back channeling and found out that the technical leader has really pissed some people off, right? Like there was one time actually at GitHub, there was a guy I wanted to hire who I thought was pretty great, and I was getting close to wanting to hire him, and I back channeled him, and I found out he had some HR issues that I was really uncomfortable with, and didn't hire him. Right, so like it's kind of the equivalent can happen in VC too, but that's usually like much earlier in the process. We don't get to a point where we're doing due diligence on the product and something falls apart unless, I mean, maybe unless it's total like vaporware, like they represented they had a product and they didn't. But I've literally never seen that happen. So sorry, I
Cool.
don't have better stories for you. It's a fun
No,
question. Just
it's
don't.
actually really
I haven't
great,
seen.
and you also gave us a glimpse into the work of a VC. So there you have it. A lot of people might think that VCs don't do much, but just think about how much work goes into an investment memo, and it's kind of like the opposite of how people say that founders raise solely on a deck, and they don't understand how much work actually goes into a deck and how much customer discovery and market research goes into a good deck.
Hmm.
So the same thing goes into an investment memo, right? There's a lot of work to produce a
Oh
good
yeah.
one.
sometimes founders get frustrated because they haven't heard from us in a few days. And what they don't know is we've done like 25 diligence calls in that 3-day period or whatever, right? Like we do a lot of work to try to get comfortable with an investment. And of course, it depends on the stage too. It's different at the A because there's more for us to actually dig into than there is at the seed when it's founders and an idea, and a lot of that then is on our read on the founders.
Got it. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And in the seed, you assume that there's a good chance they'll actually pivot into something else. So really, what you care about is good founders. Before I open this up to questions from the audience, any last things that you think people in engineering should care about as their company is trying to fundraise?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've heard a lot about the diligence that we do. And I think just, continuing to ship product features and hit any delivery targets is really important, right? We want to see that a team's executing really well and executing according to plan. And you want to see that momentum in the product. So I think that's important. As an engineer, you can also help spread the word about what your company is doing, whether Twitter or whatever, choose your social media platform of choice. But I think when we see folks online talking up their company and talking about how excited they are to work there and talk about how excited they are about what they're building or showcasing what they're building, that's always really fantastic to see. We're always looking at, especially if it's an open source community or if there's a Discord channel or a Slack, we're always looking at like who's in there, how active is it, how good is the team at responding to customer questions, like how quickly is it growing, and so helping to build that momentum, I think is really important as well. So there's a lot you can do to just make sure you're building a great product, it works. It stays online if it's something online, and that you just continue to show execution and momentum in the product and in the community. Those are the best things you can do as an engineer to support the fundraising.
Cool. This is really, really helpful. So I want to give the audience a chance to ask a couple of questions. If anyone has anything they'd like to share, use a hand emoji or anything like that, and then we'll give you the speaking permissions. And then after we open this up to questions, we'll let everyone go watch the semifinals. Those who care about it, at least we already know that Erica doesn't.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's just the Battle of Nations. Who should care about that? All right. So if you have a question, now is the time to raise your hand through an emoji, and then we'll give you speaking permissions. Before anyone does that, or while we're waiting, I will say this has been really eye-opening and inspiring, and thank you so much for joining. This was very different than our usual series, where we usually dive deeper into the ins and outs of managing engineering teams. But this was really great. I see Omer is requesting to speak, and Mariana is also requesting, so let me give them permission. Mariana, you can speak now. Mariana, you're muted, but you can unmute and ask your question. If not, Omer, why don't you go ahead? You also have speaking permissions.
Hey, nice to meet you. Hey, on, how are you?
Okay.
Nice to meet you, Erica.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about the future of engineering, given everything that is happening with GPT? How would the future engineer would look like? How would engineering management would look like? You've been probably pretty close to a lot of the things in this space for a long time. So kind of, what's your future perspective? How would the world evolve on that regard? Thanks.
Oh, it's such a good and fun question, Omer. Thank you. And it's something I don't have all the answers. I don't think anybody does, but I'll share a few thoughts because this is something that's been very top of mind for me for a while. Obviously I was at GitHub when we launched Copilot and played a small role in that. And, I've seen a lot of companies coming along in different areas of the kind of AI assisted programming space. I think, at least for the foreseeable future, like I think we're going to see a lot of kind of assistant type tools like Copilot, right? We called Copilot it was like your automated pair programmer, right? And there are a couple of other companies that are looking at, hey, you kind of add our AI to your team and then it can review your pull requests and provide feedback on them, right? So like doing code reviews, I think you've seen others for generating automated tests. And I was like, I mean, if you can do a great job of that, like no one really likes writing tests. I think most people agree that it's really good to have them. And, I know a lot of folks are into like test driven development. We will not get into that debate, but I think, if you could get great tests without having to spend your time writing them, I think that's hugely valuable. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that, which I just think, there's a huge shortage of software engineers in the world. I used to give this keynote at GitHub about like where the next 50 million developers were going to come from and how we have this massive kind of skills gap globally as software continues to eat the world. And so I think helping developers, automate more of their work while still using their brains for what's most important, which is thinking through like, how is this going to perform for the user, right? What does that experience look like? How should this be architected? I think the job of a developer is not going to go away. I hope it gets better, right? There's a lot of really tedious work that's not the most fun for developers, and like trying to understand a code base, I think, is another interesting area, and understanding how the code you're writing might impact other parts of the system when you have this like massive, sometimes like monolithic code bases like we had at GitHub. So I think there's going to be some very cool tools, and it's a space I'm definitely interested in investing in that come out. But I don't think like the job of developers is going to go away. And, I don't think in the short term, the job of managers, or at least great managers, is going to go away. I mean, if you're like managing people based on lines of code, you're doing it horribly wrong. So, I mean,
You might be saying that on the wrong platform.
Yeah, fair. But yeah, you're doing it horribly wrong. And so I think you're still looking for like, are people delivering on the features and functionality or on the roadmap? And like, as long as you're getting a great product, it doesn't really matter if somebody's getting help. And I mean, hopefully you would hope for that for them, right? I mean, a lot of developers work really hard and work really long hours. And if we can bring some little bit more balance and remove some of the less fun parts of coding so people can focus on the fun parts, I think that's a good thing for all of us.
It's a great answer, and I think that apart from focusing on the fun stuff, we'll also all have to level up, because if the boilerplate is being taken care of by AI, that leaves not just the fun stuff but also the hard stuff to the
True.
humans.
Really
So
good
we're
point.
all just going to have to be way better at what we do on average.
Yep, but you'll have more time to learn because you're not spending time on the tedious stuff too. So, but yes,
True.
I do agree.
We might even have a platform for you to practice doing that.
You
but
might
we're not
even
going to
have
shamelessly
that.
self-promote. Mariana, why don't we try again? We couldn't hear you the last time, but maybe we can hear you now.
Thank you. Thank you, On, and thank you, Erica, for inviting the conversation and sharing your thoughts. And my question was about solo founders. The classical model of a co-founding team is CTO, CEO, and maybe a marketing or business operational officer. But there are exceptional startups who were founded by a single founder. And how do you feel about it? What are your thoughts about this unpopular model?
Yeah, first of all, I don't know that it's as unpopular as some people think. I know at Y Combinator, which I went through years ago, they used to talk about, not loving to support solo founders. And it is a harder journey as a solo founder, and I'll come back to that. But I will say I'm going through the company's two outstanding solo founders already. I've done 5 investments, and 2 of them were in outstanding solo founders. One is a woman named Monica building a company called Zata. Super cool. It's like, we call it a data layer because it's essentially a serverless database with built-in search and analytics. That's a perfect complement to like your Jamstack applications. She is amazing, right? She's a repeat founder. She's a mom. She's got an 8-year-old amazing daughter, and she's a total badass. And I had no hesitation over funding her as a solo founder. And then there's also Jake from Railway. Railway is kind of like a serverless version of Heroku for the modern era, if you will. You can kind of drag and drop your infrastructure. It is amazingly cool. We're talking about great products and what engineers can do to help with fundraising. Like Railway has just built an outstanding product that people say is like magic to use, which I love. And he's a solo founder too. And a first-time founder, and pretty young. He's still in his 20s. And so, if you have a clear product vision, and, in Jake's case, he was further along in product development when we invested, but like, if you've built something that people say is magical and they love, then I think, that's all you need to do. Easier said than done. But, I think the thing to think about if you are going the solo founder route is you need to hire help earlier, and especially operational help, which is going to be unpopular with some VCs, and certainly was not the way Y Combinator would talk about it. But like, with Jake and the Railway team, they're like 12 people, though they're rapidly hiring. One of the first things we said is like, look, you have to get an operational leader in here because you're spending your time on stuff that is like not a good use of your time, right? You're dealing with payroll and processing employment agreements and stock options and like doing your financial reporting to us and building out the like infrastructure that supports your company. And it just takes time away from focusing on the product. And like when you have multiple founders, like I mentioned this company Dagger earlier, there's 3 of them, right? And they hired the CFO out of Docker as well. And so they kind of had a team where you can distribute this work a little more across the team. And like, in my case with Bitnami, my co-founder was super technical. He focused on product and engineering, and I built the product or the company and like the business around the product. And so like, you can't do everything. No one can. And so if you're a solo founder, I think you just need to be thoughtful about building that team around you that can take some of this work off your plate, because you need to focus on the highest value things, which are, talking to customers to build the right product, and then driving the early sales, as well as hiring exceptional talent into the company, right? Like, that's your job as a founder, and you need to find ways to delegate everything else off of your plate. But yeah, I'm totally in support of solo founders when it's the right person.
Cool.
Thank you, Erica.
We have time for one last question. Neve, the stage is yours.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Erica, and hi, on everybody. Yeah, I would be really happy if you can share a bit about what metrics of engagement you saw that were really good to imply a success for like developer tools product mostly.
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, it really depends on the stage. One of the things that we're looking for at the early stage is just growth and adoption, right? And the best companies have something like 25% month over month growth, which is outstandingly high, but that is the leaders of the pack have something like that. I mean, 10% month over month growth is most people's targets. And I think that's a really good target. But if you can get up to the 25% target, that's great. And that could be, it depends, again, on what you're building. If it's an open source project, we look for like growth in downloads. We do look at GitHub stars, but that's like, I don't know, you can game it and it's just kind of a directional indicator. We look at pull requests if you're trying to build an engaged open source community, like where are they coming from? Do you have contributors outside of your team? We look at growth in Discord or Slack communities, like how much is it growing month over month? So we look at all those things at first. And then, of course, if it's like, going back to the railway example, which is an online service, like we look at what does that funnel look like? How many people are signing up? And then how many of those are converting to monthly active users? What's your retention rate over time? And then, as a company matures, we look at, the conversion from, maybe a free tier user to a paid user. And then one really important metric is net revenue retention, right? So it's that land and expand motion that you see in PLG companies, like, hey, somebody like started using it, then how much does that account grow over time and at what rate? So, again, it depends on stage, early stage, and especially for open source, it's really about community growth and engagement across different channels. And then, if it's like an online, a service with maybe a free tier, we look at how people are moving through each of those stages and what's the retention like. Like we have some companies that have like 30 to 40% day 30 retention, which is pretty outstanding for a product. And so we're always looking for those types of metrics, as well as, again, how many people are actually converting into paying customers. Or are you just going to end up with, a slew of free users that never want to pay you?
All right. Thank you very much. It's really interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you so much, Erica, for this wonderful conversation. I had a great time. Hopefully you had a great time too. And everyone else, stay tuned. We're going to have another amazing guest next month. And see you all soon.
Thanks so much. This was a blast. Really appreciate everybody showing up, and thanks for the great questions. Hope everyone has a great rest of the week.
Thanks so much, Erica. Bye-bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye.